However you are and whenever you are, welcome good souls to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. Wow, we are having quite a storm tonight here, so fingers crossed we don't lose the power. I did have a little bit of a technical issue getting started tonight, so I hope that's not a sign. Again, keep your fingers crossed. But we are powered up with two great guests joining me tonight. In the first hour, we have disclosure for UFO transparency advocate Stephen Bassett. And in the second hour, Chrissy Newton of the podcast Alt Pop Repeat and contributor to The Debrief. So it is a UFO night tonight, all 2 hours. It's going to be a good one. If you're a fan of Paranormal Now, please consider becoming a Patreon to support this show and Coffee and UFOs podcast. I put my heart and soul into this every week, as you know, and every little bit of help I do appreciate. Skype call-in line will be open tonight in the last 30 minutes. So if you want to call in and ask Chrissy a question, just go into the show description, show notes, click on Skype, and you can call in during the last 30 minutes. And of course, as always, my love for coffee is everlasting. And for those of you who feel the same, you can get a 20% discount off of Alien Coffee Bean by going to aliencoffeebean.com and entering the passcode mystery20. All caps mystery20 for 20% off. So that's pretty cool. All right, so I'm going to jump right into it because we got delayed here in the beginning. Stephen Bassett is a political activist, disclosure advocate, and the executive director of Paradigm Research Group, founded in 1996 to end a government-imposed embargo on the truth behind extraterrestrial-related phenomena. He has spoken to audiences around the world about the implications of disclosure, the formal confirmation by heads of state of an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. He has lectured around the world on the political implications of UAP ET phenomena and given over 1,200 radio and television interviews. PRG's advocacy work has been extensively covered by national and international media, including being featured on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and the Washington Post and New York Times. In 2013, PRG organized and conducted a citizen hearing on disclosure. It was kind of a big deal at the National Press Club in Washington. In November of 2014, PRG launched a 2-year political initiative out of Washington, D.C. that injected the ET issue into the 2016 presidential campaign. PRG will soon launch a new platformed web series, The Disclosure Wire, from studios in Hollywood, California, and the National Press Building 2 blocks from the White House. Bassett has appeared in many documentary films, and his lectures and interviews are well represented on YouTube, as he will be tonight. If you want to find out more and support his cause, go to paradigmresearchgroup.org. Steve, welcome back to Paranormal Now.
It's good to be with you, Alan, as always.
Thank you.
You're looking fine. You're looking good.
Thank you. It's the pink lighting, you know. Tennessee Williams, anybody? No? Okay. So, how are you? And what the heck is going on in the world of ufology right now? It's been a lot of twists and turns over the past, I would say, 9 months.
To say the least. More than I can keep up with. First of all, and I mean no disrespect whatsoever, I assure you, but I like to do this.
Go for it.
The paranormal has been around a long time, and it's got a big following, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. But my background is kind of science, and I'm of the mind there's no such thing as paranormal. Everything in this universe is normal. Though thousands of years ago, I think the average Homo sapien was pretty, how would you say, spooked a lot, because they had no idea what the hell was happening. But particularly the ET issue, the ET presence, non-human intelligent beings able to build craft that can fly rather nicely, is completely normal. Their existence is normal. So that's not an issue.
Well, that's true. You know, when I was coming up with a name for this show, you know, I could have said abnormally now or normally now. No. But paranormal. See, now when I was growing up, literally anything that was unknown and defied the accepted paradigm of the nature of reality and our place in the universe, was considered paranormal. It's kind of clumped in that group. But I do appreciate your comment, because that's the goal, right? To prove that the paranormal, or some of it, if you accept that definition for the UAP, that indeed it's real.
There's actually something even more profound embedded in our little exchange here. The humans are going through a very significant transition, many transitions. But one of them is the transition from a world in which there was some things that you knew and a lot of things you didn't know, and all manner of exotic, frightening, religious or whatever connotations were put on these things that were kind of mysterious. And that's totally understandable.
Mm-hmm.
But we have finally reached the point as an advanced technological civilization with now a very long track record of extensive science,
Mm-hmm.
that we now have come to the point where I think we're transitioning to this state, which is the universe is simply things we know and things we don't know. Right?
Fair enough, yeah.
And pretty much everything we don't know, probably eventually we will know. And so it's just a matter of getting enough information. Why is this important? It takes a lot of the juice out of the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. Once you start to transition that way, you're less likely to see something unusual and then immediately turn and flee and maybe accidentally run off a cliff. Okay. And so we've got people out there at Skinwalker Ranch, and really, in terms of what's going on right now, Skinwalker Ranch certainly would be classified perhaps as paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Most people would argue with that. And you go back a number of decades and, it's definitely paranormal. But what we've got are these scientists out there. They got the equipment. They're testing everything. They've got all manner of research and protocols. There's plenty of money. And they are working at it and going to get it down, and they're going to figure it out. That is where we are now. Now, by and large, that's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about something really exotic like ghosts, we really don't know much about ghosts. And so put that park that in the paranormal, no problem. The
Mm-hmm.
ET issue, however, is a little different. And here's why. The principal reason we don't know what we need to know or should know about this phenomena is the government has said, we're not going to let you know. We're going to keep it from you.
Sure.
We're going to deny it. We're going to lie about it. We're going to undermine the efforts to find out for national security reasons. We're going to interfere with the process of knowing. And unfortunately, in order to do that, because it was a formidable task,
Mm-hmm.
which is still underway 75 years after Roswell, they had to, get fairly serious by heaping massive amounts of ridicule on the subject and on the people researching the subject, diminishing them, diminishing the issue, wasting people's time, and sometimes driving them nuts. Hey, boys will be boys, right? So one of the ways we get out from under the truth embargo, as I call it, is to not play the government's game. So they have prevented us from getting the kind of information we need, but including this whole concept, are they real or are they not real? Are UFOs real? Which is an utterly stupid idea. Totally stupid idea. It's like you see something in
Mm-hmm.
If you see something in the road, you don't quite know what it is. Is your first response, is that real? Meaning what? Is it a projection from another dimension, right? Or are you having an hallucination?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's real. You just don't know what it is. But the whole idea of are UFOs real played perfectly into the truth embargo. Okay, first, we don't even know if they're real. All right, so why are you bothering us with your FOIA requests?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and the other way was to give it that aura of the paranormal, so that if you are a journalist or you're a politician or a scientist or whatever, and you want to address
Mm-hmm.
the issue, well, to a lot of people, you might as well be looking into ghosts or fairies or goblins or whatever else, because it's all part of the paranormal, isn't it?
Does it undercut then your work, do you think, to associate it with the paranormal in popular culture?
My work is to reach as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I assure you, there's a huge number of people out there that are really intrigued by the paranormal, and are approaching these things, a lot of things from that point of view.
Yeah.
they have as much right to know what the hell's going on as anybody else. I have no problem with that. If that is the doorway for somebody to this issue, that is okay. But I bring it up because we are in this transition. Another perfect example of this, Alan, of a transitional moment. Not speaking politically, but simply referring to the fact that during the election of 2016, Secretary Clinton, who was the leading candidate, went on Jimmy Kimmel's show, among other shows she went on. And I actually take some responsibility for that. I don't think they were pleased, but I helped make that happen. The point is that she went on, her husband had already gone on. There was a lot of news about this, hundreds of articles written about her connection to the issue. And she had to respond. And the way she responded on Kimmel was very interesting. He asked her, your husband trying to get something about this, I think when he was president and he couldn't get the information or nothing happened. What now? And she said, well, I'm going to do it again. All right. Meaning I'm going to go after this subject matter or these files like my husband tried to, but got stonewalled by his own government. And then she said, and by the way, there's a new term for this. It's not UFO, it's UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, why was that important? Why was that a transitional moment? UFO is the term, is the aspect of this whole issue for 75 years that has gotten the most ridicule. It is where all the ridicule gathers up. It's where all of the debunking and the skepticism, it all gets focused on that. In other words, this is nonsense. It's called UFO. You mentioned the acronym UFO. Hey, sorry, I got no time for you. And that made it a problem for politicians and academics and journalists, right? If they want to do an article about it and they're interviewing somebody, they say UFO, you write it down, big problem. UAP means exactly the same thing, but it doesn't have 70 years of ridicule heaped on it. And that's why we needed to change that term. And she did that. And this is part of my job is to help this transition along, to get the language where we need it. But I'm not throwing shade on anybody, believe me. I watched gazillion paranormal movies and stuff, and I loved them all.
Yeah, no shade. Don't worry about that. I feel quite comfortable in my paranormal world.
Yes, you're good.
And because what I do enjoy, and it's funny that you said this earlier, is that I enjoy not always knowing the answers. Which is not to say that I don't want the answers like you do, right? But there's so much in this universe. It's kind of like being a detective. You enjoy your job. If there was nothing to investigate, then you wouldn't have that job to enjoy. So it's a little bit of a conundrum, but I think that it's going to be centuries and centuries before we have all the answers of the universe, conceived and understood. So I think that let's get as much as we can, and there will be plenty of mystery moving forward. There'll be plenty of paranormal topics to continue on, unless you think that science is at some kind of tipping point where it'll exponentially become so advanced that we will be enlightened in a few hundred years.
We will have not figured out the universe in 10,000 years or 50,000
if there's one universe, right? Okay. Sure.
But I know some people that know a lot more, some entities that know a lot more about the universe than we do. They're called extraterrestrials. And if we could ever engage in them in open contact, right? Not covert, sequestered contact in the middle of the night, right? We might learn a great deal. And that's one of the reasons why this movement's important, because it's not just getting disclosure. I believe that disclosure, confirmation, worldwide acknowledgement could lead to open contact very quickly thereafter. And thus we could learn a great deal. But yeah, one of the things about being a scientist, I'm not a scientist, but I was attracted to it, is that, the universe is one giant mystery. And if you actually work at it and apply some thought, you can figure some of the mystery out. There was a time when there were so many fundamental things that nobody understood, and somebody sat down and figured it out, like the Pythagorean theorem. That was a really big deal back then, okay? And it was just lying there like low-hanging fruit, right? And I think Pythagoras and probably some Arabs got on top of that. The Pythagorean theorem right now is no big deal. It was a big deal then, but not anymore. The universe is a mystery. And one of the great gifts that we have as sentient beings is that we can actually explore those mysteries. We can learn things, which is why it's so tragic when instead of using this sentient ability that we have and brain power, both individually and collectively, to continue to learn about this unbelievable universe, we instead use that same capacity to build weapons of mass destruction so we can blow the hell out of everybody and everything. And that is another transition underway that we're seeing unfold in our lifetime, my lifetime, that's going to get resolved pretty soon, one way or the other.
We have a question from Greg O'Brien in YouTube. Wasn't UAP coined back in the late 80s? Now, I think it goes way back to like the 50s or even possibly late 40s. Do you know the answer to that, Steve?
So that phrase, unexplained or unidentified aerial phenomena, I think it's popped up. I think it's popped up going back a long ways. Trouble is, it didn't take. It might turn up, but it was not the term. So if you give an interview to the Washington Times, it's UFO, right? Or if it's in the movies, or if it's in the novels. So again, it's not that it wasn't there. It's just that it did not become the nomenclature that you use. You know, there's appropriate language for things. There are things that you are supposed to call things by certain names, and if you don't, it looks a little weird. And so what we've been able to do is finally get UAP to the point where it is accepted in mainstream discussion as and understood, right? Because if you say UAP, nobody knows what you're talking about. By the way, there is a political party in Australia called the UAP Party. The point is that now, if a journalist or a politician says UAP, people know what it means, and it doesn't have the stigma. It is the term that's in the laws that were passed, the defense appropriations bills, 2 years running, not UFO. UFO is not in those, and that is no accident. We have worked very hard, thank you, Hillary Clinton, to get that acronym gone. And let me get more intense about it. Over the centuries, whole groups of people were virtually isolated, diminished, harmed by sticking a label on them to identify them as such, and therefore making them a target for anybody that hears that label. And of course, we're moving away from that. Those kinds of labels are now considered inappropriate. And if you try to use those labels now, you're going to have a problem. This is not unusual. But UFO is a little more intellectual, a little more tricky, but it's the same thing. The government ridiculed it, made that acronym the target, and it worked. It won't work anymore.
But how long will that work for? Because online, you do see people who come to the subject, or discussions with family members who come to the subject now like, oh, maybe UFOs are real, and then leads them to another thought. Well, if extraterrestrials are coming here, what else is real? Are alien abductions real? Are ghosts real? I mean, so I would imagine that over time, UAP would also start getting an association with the paranormal, and will we get the answers that we need before that happens?
No, UAP is on the way out of that room into another room, not back into it.
Okay. And why is that?
Because UAP has come. Well, UAP. It's a chicken and the egg thing. The issue is now going mainstream. It has passed major milestones in the last 4 years. It's a whole different place than it was when I started in 96, 2000, 2005. Unprecedented things have happened. This issue is being normalized, legitimized. It's going mainstream, and we're heading towards confirmation and disclosure. It's only a matter of time. UAP is part of that transition. In other words, it's not UFOs, which was associated with a lot of this and that, but UAPs. And UAP, because now it has become mainstream, is now associated with what? It's associated with pilots seeing craft out their window. It's associated to multiple events where these craft are being targeted by radar and so forth. Sure. It's firsthand testimony from nuclear weapons tampering witnesses. It is research that's emerging out of the Pentagon, at least some of what they've done. They've done research forever that shows that they're actually studying it. And so UAP is associated with this issue now, very much like protons and electrons are associated with particle physics. There's no chance that the terms proton and electron are going to somehow start becoming associated with the paranormal.
I hope so. I hope you're right, because even some of the, I can't recall, there was one pilot in particular who had seen a craft and speculated on whether this was coming in and out of another dimension or something along those lines. So that language is still, the bizarre aspect of it is still finding its way to associate with it. Now, that's not the same as a ghost or chupacabra or something like that. Yeah. But there is this kind of bizarre aspect. These things
we're transitioning. We're transitioning. Remember, this has a 75-year background of being undermined and ridiculed and so forth and marginalized. So it's not going to just flip overnight. What's most important right now is not that everybody in the country gets on the same page about the language. What's important is the language being used by the reporters, by the members of Congress, by scientists like Avi Loeb and so forth. That's what's important. If that term, that term is being used by them, which makes it easier for them to engage the issue without getting a lot of collateral flack, and that's enough. Okay, I studied quantum physics, and let me tell you. In terms of the scientific realm, there's probably no area more bizarre than quantum physics. And most physicists will acknowledge that. I mean, it's constantly talked about. They go in, they study it, they go, well, yeah, this is the way apparently it works, but I cannot imagine how the hell that happens that way. Quantum entanglement, all of this. But let me tell you, in all of the lectures that I've ever heard about quantum physics, or what I read about it, and all the very extraordinary aspects of it, I've never seen a scientist refer to it as paranormal. It is what it is, right? It is part of our world, and it is normal. We don't fully understand it, but we know enough to know, okay, it's unusual, but eventually we may figure out the basis for that unusualness. Sure. This is the way, look, this is the ground state we need to have as a civilization. There's plenty of mystery out there to enjoy, plenty of fiction to enjoy. I don't want to take that away, but we've got to start being able to not only distinguish between what we know and what we don't know and label it as such, but we also have got to learn to distinguish between the truth of things and the lies and propaganda of things. Right? Because the universe can create these ambiguities, but nobody lies better than humans. The universe may lie to us a little bit, at least spook us, but nobody lies better than humans. We will lie 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and not even think twice about it. It's a huge problem for our own survival and well-being.
Sure. Well, it's also part of our survival and well-being, little white lies, to compliment someone politely at work, right? That sort of thing. Right. So it does serve a very practical function, but then you're right. It's built into our everyday habit. So it's a hard thing to break. I have to ask you this.
It's a habit. It's our worldview. It's how we function. It's our politics. So little white lies are here. No big deal. The stuff I'm talking about is like stacked up 10 stories high, and that's where the problem is.
But let me ask you this, because Mick West was on the show not too long ago, and I asked him about Michio Kaku, who seems to be quite open to the possibility that these exotic UAPs, may not be made here on Earth, or are seemingly defying the laws of physics. Mick West says that Michio Kaku simply didn't do his research, and he doesn't know what he's talking about.
So, Mick does amuse me a great deal.
How would you respond to that?
I wouldn't even bother. Michio Kaku, let me put it this way. Michio Kaku is more open of the very well-known science. I guess you could say, what's the word? He's kind of the Carl Sagan of our time. I think Freeman Dyson would like to be, not Freeman Dyson, but Neil deGrasse Tyson would like to be, but he's not going to be the Sagan of our time. I'm sorry. But let me assure you that what extremely brilliant scientists say about this phenomena is not what they know about this phenomena or what they understand about this phenomena. They are and have been, there's extreme reluctance and limitations regarding what they say or do on this phenomena. The consequences are quite significant. And so the scientific world, again, is also in a transition where it's moving out of this, I don't, if I don't say anything or think about it, then nothing can harm me. I'll hide under my blanket, until they're starting to realize, okay, I've got to start getting a little more aggressive. So what was Carl Sagan's absolute personal opinion and understanding of this amount? We don't really know. Same thing for Kaku and a lot of other scientists. They simply cannot simply step up and say, yeah. They can't do. I know there are plenty of very top scientists in this world right now that if they felt it was safe, they could stand in front of a camera on a major television show and do exactly what Robert Bigelow did back in May of 2017. And that is tell Laura Logan, there's extraterrestrials here. All right. And then he repeated it. They're here. All right. That happens to be true. And he happened to be right. But he was in a position he felt he could say that. Michio Kaku was not. So we won't really know where our scientific community was until after disclosure. And it will be awkward. But I know enough of them are going to come forward and say, look, I'm not really apologizing, but the fact is I knew about the ET presence in 1973 or 87 or 89 or when I was 16 years old. And I just could not address it. It would have been a career-ending thing. It would have been a problem. The government's truth embargo was very effective. But I want to say that now, and I think they will, because after disclosure, one of the many tasks before us is, okay, how can we never have this happen again? What do we need to do? And speaking out is part of that, that we will never, ever have a situation where the United States government or our government, let's focus on our government, passes off a lie this big for 3/4 of a century, denying access, denying a proper research, denying access to technology, wasting our time, undermining their own credibility. We never want that to happen again. And so the scientists who do come forward post-disclosure and say, look, I could have come forward in 1964 and told you, yeah, I know there's an ET presence. I worked on that program. I worked on this program. I read some good books, and I'm sorry, but I could not do it. And that will be helpful because it will help alert us to the fact, folks, the world is changing and developing so fast and becoming so dangerous. We do not have the luxury of our governments literally denying us extraordinary truths about the world we live in, with massive consequences, simply because it makes them uncomfortable or because they have an illusion that everything in this world is about national security. Let's never do this again. And so again, I'm looking forward to sitting down with Michio one day after disclosure, maybe have a beer and talk about old times. I met him briefly once. I like him. Neil deGrasse Tyson makes it a lot harder to like. I'm not happy with the things he's saying. Bothers me because he just crosses some lines I don't like, but he's not the only one. But we've got Michio, we've got some other scientists that are going to be there for us as we close in on disclosure.
Yeah, one does get the feeling sometimes scientists draw a line in the sand, and no matter what is shown, they won't cross the line. When we come back from this first break, I'm going to ask Stephen what the next phase is now. What should we expect in the next couple of years as far as disclosure goes? This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on the Paranormal Pop YouTube channel, rebroadcast on KUNX, the UNX network. I will see you on the inverted upside down.
Tell me why, with 12 sides, the odds are that we die, roll the die, as you hide, I can't find you on the other side of the line.
This coffee is delicious. Is that a UFO? I'm actually seeing a UFO. This coffee is awesome. That's why they call it alien coffee bean. Is this even made on Earth? Hey all, Paranormal Now will be syndicated on the UnX network, the new mainstream, where you can find your favorite hosts and shows on the cutting edge of ufological and paranormal news and topics. Listen for Paranormal Now rebroadcast on the X at 2 a.m. EST Fridays, 11 p.m. PST Thursdays at unxnetwork.com.
On and again, the signs keep on coming, they point to the end, but I hold on so tight.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your most grateful host, rebroadcasting 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the UnX network. So if you missed tonight's show, catch it on the UnX later tonight. And of course, as usual, the podcast will drop tomorrow. My guest is the one and only Steve Bassett, and we're going to try to take this into a place we've never gone to before. Steve, I've got to ask you, have you personally ever seen, not just a UFO, anything high strangeness?
Anything high strangeness?
Mm-hmm.
No,
I'm not talking abnormal, human behavior.
no. I've never seen what we consider a high strangeness event. Never have.
Have you ever had like a psychic connection, maybe on a psychedelic or just meditating?
Oh,
no.
Oh, I have tried to venture into the world of psychedelics, and I don't react. It may have something to do with some medication I'm taking. The point is that I have no reaction, so it's kind of shut off. But one day, if I can make some adjustments, I may want to go there. We'll see. But no, I have led a very boring, mainstream Occam's razor life, which has helped me in dealing with things like politics and activism and so forth.
I would not say that it's a boring life, at least from our perspective. Perhaps from yours, it's a little bit different. But
relative to a lot of my colleagues, I mean, I have people that tell me unbelievable stories. I mean, they have been through everything. They've done everything. Sure. And I'm going, what does a guy got to do? Okay. Yeah.
Well, if you do psychedelics, Steve, please make sure you have someone who's sober around you just in case. Because I know from experience, things can go bad on a rare
that
occasion.
was the plan. That was the plan, but no reaction from me. There's something is wrong up here. I may not have watched enough music in the 60s. Mm-hmm. But you asked earlier. Oh, by the way, I like that coffee ad. That's really a fun ad. I like that ad. Good ad. Thanks, you've got professional skills.
I appreciate that.
You wanted to know what's coming.
I do.
Let me put it this way, that I think people can relate to. I'm a film buff. I mean, I've watched a gazillion films, thousands of films. It was either that or read tens of thousands of books, and I'm a really slow reader, so it was the movies. And we've all heard about the film that got big production deal, and they got it put together, but they had to delay it because the director died. They had to delay it again because this and that, and so the film was slated to hit the theaters in the 2021. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't actually get to the theaters until 2024. And there's some bizarre long story about how that happened. We know about that. Mm-hmm. This is kind of what has happened here. The Disclosure movie, and by that I'm referring to the Disclosure event. There's actually been a movie called Disclosure. Mm-hmm. But the Disclosure event, we'll call it the movie of confirmation, was pretty much set to premiere 4 years ago, possibly even 5 years ago. And the necessary things were done, were pretty much in place, and it was simply a matter of simply moving forward. But then production problems developed. All right.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
They are in chronological order. The outcome of the election in 2016. Mm-hmm. All right. A huge, not only a substantial amount of political chaos, and an increase in toxic partisanship in the American government.
Ain't that the truth?
Followed by the worst pandemic and plague in human history. Not one, not a, but worse, based upon its characteristics and how much it's cost to deal with it and how many people have died. The most recent estimates is around 30 million based upon pretty solid calculations of excess deaths, which is the easiest way to do that.
Okay.
It's way greater than the report. That's 30 million. And that's in spite of all of our technology and all of our vaccinations and all of the efforts that we have taken. If this pandemic had hit back around 1910, it would have probably killed 1 billion people. So worst pandemic in human history. And also worse because it's mutating very quickly. We're getting variants after variants and multiple surges. So it literally affected the entire planet for 2 years. In the middle of that, we had an historical event in America in which our capital was overrun by protesters, right, wanting to kill people, right?
One of the most disgusting moments in our history. Yeah.
Some thought it was disgusting, some thought it was really cool. But the point is that I assure you, all of these things were absolutely going to make it impossible to put that movie into the theaters. It had to keep getting postponed.
And so, really quick, Steve, when you're talking about this movie, where is it coming from? Who's producing it, or is this? Are we talking a hypothetical?
No. Oh. The movie is confirmation. It's the president of the United States going in front of the American people, confirming the extraterrestrial presence.
Is this something that they would pre-record, edit together, put something out there?
I'm not speaking about a real movie. This is a metaphorical movie, right? It's a metaphor.
I just want to clarify that. Yeah.
Okay. And so the production needed to put this thing into the theaters and get disclosure. Witnesses had to be identified. Military witnesses had to be identified. That was being done. Members of Congress needed to be briefed, particularly members of key committees needed to be briefed on what was going on so they can make a decision about how to proceed. The Department of Defense needed to be given an opportunity to get on board and start being cooperative. And that took place based upon some legislation that was coming out of the Senate and the House. The public's interest and awareness of this process needed to be expanded. The journalism needed to get on board in a way it never had been before, and that really begins with the New York Times articles of December 16th, 2017. Since then, there have been nearly 1,600 articles related to the, how would you say, the aftermath of the New York Times articles in December of 2017 and the launch of the To the Stars Academy. 1,500. They're all on my website. You can go read them all. I have them earmarked in red. All right. Unprecedented media coverage. UFO goes away. UAP comes in. Serious discussion. Harvard actually gets into the game with Avi Loeb, though basically he's only brought Harvard up to about 1959. But I'm not going to complain. It's still something. And so all the pieces were coming together for congressional hearings to be held, politically safe, based on national security, without any woo or any of that. Military witnesses under oath for the second time in their lives, credible people that would be watched by hundreds of millions, if not 1 billion or more people around the world. These would be the most televised hearings in all of history. And this testimony would be public, along with some classified testimony. That would then have set the stage for the president to come forward after a modest length of time and say, I've seen this evidence, you've seen it. I've talked with my key people, and we do conclude that, yes, this phenomenon is extraterrestrial, it's non-human, and that is disclosure, capital D. That's the confirmation event. That is the biggest, that's the most profound event in human history. That movie was supposed to hit the theaters back in early 2017. And all hell broke loose, right?
Right.
And it has pushed it 5 years forward. Now, you can't complain. What's happened has happened. History is a big deal, and it's like a tide coming in. You don't just stand on the ocean and say, look, I'd rather you didn't come in right now because I want to have a picnic here on the beach.
Was there a reassessment because of the pandemic, because of the election? Because I know when we had spoken last time, you had expected things to go quite differently for Hillary. So was it the unexpected that put this on a different track? Or
again, these events took place. They weren't. The pandemic was not expected. The election outcome was not expected. The insurrection wasn't expected.
it does seem like Hillary kind of like teed up the UAP conversation in a way. So
Oh yeah, she sure did. I could give you an hour and a half on that.
So would that have gone ahead either way as it has? Like would To the Stars Academy had played things out, and ATIP, and Lou Elizondo coming out? Would all that have happened if Hillary was as it did? If Hillary were elected,
it would have happened right away, probably in December or January of 2017. That was when the movie was supposed to hit the theaters.
Except
it was set ready to go. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you've got the WikiLeaks dumping out the emails of Podesta outing Tom DeLonge's engagement there, which wasn't too serious, but then she lost. And history is like a giant tide taking us along. If you swim against that tide, you will drown. So what you do is you swim with it, and you hope to try to get done what you need to get done. I, in my wildest dreams, could not have imagined. Oh, by the way, did I mention war in Europe? Yeah, that's happened too. So in my wildest dream, I could not have imagined this. Do I think it's the gods of Olympus bringing down, terrorizing and driving us crazy like they used to do with the Greeks? No. I think it's a complicated world. And one of the reasons that I and many others were pushing for disclosure in 2000, and 2004, and 2007 is because history is this way. And this thing needs to get done. And if you keep kicking the can down the road, right, you may get run over by a semi-tractor truck. And that's the ball game.
Does something like the Q phenomena, does that inadvertently hurt disclosure?
It hurts everything. That phenomena is part of what I call the democratization of propaganda. Used to be that propaganda was something that governments with lots of money and resources and oftentimes complete control of the media in a country would spew out in order to control the people. But thanks to the internet and social media, just like everybody can be a podcaster now, everybody can be a propagandist. And not only can they be a propagandist, they can get people to believe them. They can be spewing nothing but lies and end up with 1 million followers in 12 months. So the democratization of propaganda is a whole nother problem that we are trying to deal with as best we can. We didn't ask for it. Nobody took a referendum and say, do you want an internet? Nobody took a referendum and said, do you want social media? No, we just got it, and we're trying to deal with it. And that's other problems. But let's just put it this way. One of the amusing aspects of the situation right now is there is a whole raft of things spewing out of the dark web and on QAnon that are beyond nonsense, right? Ridiculous, crazy, absurd, venal, but not the ET UAP issue. That, in fact, is kind of moving forward nice and clean. And one of the reasons it is because it's nonpartisan. The ET issue is nonpartisan. It's not Democrat, it's not Republican, it's not Arab, it's not Jew, it's not Catholic. It is simply the physical world. And so by and large, the politicians, the journalists can deal with it in a nonpartisan, less biased way. That's why you have someone like Tucker Carlson, one of the most partisan people in the entire media world, has embraced the issue, has brought people on and made reasonable statements about it and been helpful. Okay, that's a good thing.
I think it's a good thing. And I wonder how much that reflects in society in general, because I certainly have made friends within the paranormal and ufological community of political persuasions and opinions that are so opposite of mine, that it's a wonder that we've become friends, and here we are, which is an amazing thing. So yeah, how many bastions of how many places do we have, like the UAP, where people can come together and agree on something?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, and
it's related to the political world, to the military, to our government.
All right, here's one: dogs and cats. Let's face it. I got I got a Twitter stream, I got a Facebook stream, I got a LinkedIn stream, and I tell you, there's a whole lot of nasty stuff that comes on my stream. Okay. But when it comes to dogs and cats, hey, a really great cat video or one of those dodo videos about rescuing dogs, who is not going to like that? I don't care what your politics are.
But that's the point, though, is that that's not related to politics, whereas the UAP is. It's a governmental issue that citizens have to consider in regard to freedom of information, liberty, safety, whatever.
Almost. It's not so much as related to politics. It's related to government. There's a difference. Let's take the water treatment system in your city. The water treatment in your city is related to government. In most cases, they're run by the government, taxpayer money. Does that mean they're nonpartisan? I mean, does that mean they're partisan? Meaning there's a Democratic view of the waste treatment plant and a Republican view? No. It's pretty fundamental. It's pretty basic. We all need it. And let's make sure it all works well.
True, but not many people sit around a coffee table talking about it like we're doing now.
Well, yeah, that's because the UAP issue is far, far more profound. But again, being profound doesn't mean it's political per se. Anything can be politicized. And there's some of that going on. But at the core issue, it's like relativity. You didn't have the Democrats and the Republicans back in the early 20th century having raging political debates on exactly what the truth is of the Einstein relativity theories, meaning, well, I'm not buying that crap. There's no way that space and time can move, and anybody that says that is a rotten Democrat. We need to vote them out of office. No,
sure, yeah.
The ET issue is part of the physical world. It is fundamentally a scientific issue, and it's getting increasingly approached that way. And and one of the reasons that it's important is that in a time when hyper-partisan toxic politics is ripping the country to pieces, wasting huge sums of money, because the more toxic it gets, the more it costs to get elected. So now our elections cost $4, $5, $6, $8 billion. Other countries can get somebody elected for $45 and a Big Mac. Not here. And the reason it costs so much money is because it's so awful, and you have to spend so much money convincing people, I'm not as awful as you think I am, right? And so the ET issue offers the world, and by the way, there's bipartisan, there's binational, there's biracial stuff, and by that I mean you've got conflicts between all kinds of groups and so forth. The ET issue transcends all of that. It is an opportunity for us to come together as a species around something important, an opportunity we have been denied because the government doesn't believe we can handle that truth.
So the movie is being rewritten. It's been side railed, and so now where are we? What are the editors doing to get this movie back on track again?
Hasn't been too much rewritten. It's mostly just been delayed. Look, first of all, we have to avoid nuclear war. That would be good. All right. I happen to think that that's not a done deal by any means. I think there's a high risk of nuclear war, and I'm quite worried about it, and everybody else should be. And it was inevitable. I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. I've been warning about it for 25 years as others, but we kept kicking the can down the road. Can't deal with that. Can't deal with this. Can't really deal with the nuclear proliferation thing. Can't get rid of the weapons. Can't do that, blah, blah. And then a Mack truck runs you down, and there's no more can kicking that's going to go on. All right. So there's that. The pandemic has got to get to a better place. We're going through the fifth surge, but vaccinations, overall immunity is improved. It ultimately, we're never going to get rid of this virus. It'll come down to how many people die and how many people go to the hospitals. When that gets down to a reasonable number, we can function more normally.
Sure.
And we need to be in a more normal space for something as big as bringing people together for these hearings and engaging this issue. So there's that. The politics per se, I really encourage the government, the people involved, to try to get disclosure this year. If there is a political change of administration at the end of this year, I predict that 2025 could be, what's the word I'm looking for? Weird.
Weird. Okay.
Weird.
See, I'm certainly not as optimistic as you. Jimmy Church, I was on his show last week, and he asked me that question, and I kind of took me off guard because I'm a bit more pessimistic about it. I'm thinking more along the 10-year line.
10 years to what?
Till we get a disclosure, meaning that, hey, these UFOs are real and they're off-world.
Yeah, I would be happy to give you 1,000-to-1 odds on that. Pick a dollar amount you want to work with. What has changed is this: is that because of the work of a lot of people and historical events, the rise of the internet, social media, and everything else, the cell phone, the podcast, and so forth. In these 5 years since the To the Stars Academy launched and the story of the ATIP program was taken in the New York Times, this issue has spread out and infused itself in the world well beyond anything as we've ever seen before. It is enculturated. It is now endemic. It is everywhere. And the amount of information being exchanged in the background, constantly going on, websites developing, podcasts, and what have you, witnesses coming forward. So the idea that, okay, now we need to take a time off and let's take 10 years and revisit this issue, not going to happen. And so let's just say that if we can get through the European war, if we can get things settled down a little bit, the moment that happens, you're going to start seeing this issue coming in really fast, focusing on the Congress, focusing on the DOD, demanding action very quickly. But most people, including myself, are somewhat stepping back. This isn't the time to be running around Washington trying to get people to hold a hearing on ET issues when we're concerned that a war in Europe could go nuclear at any time, and that thousands and thousands of people are still dying every week from a pandemic. So there's times you have to step back. Gandhi had to do it. The Indian independence movement was going along very nicely, thank you very much, and he was leading it, and they were on their way to get it, and then World War II breaks out, and he was faced with a decision. Do we continue to protest against the British in India while the British are fighting and maybe losing a war to the Nazis in Europe? No, you have to step back. So we have stepped back, but I assure you, this issue is now absolutely entrenched. We've crossed all the key milestones. And so as soon as it's possible, I am hoping, or I expect, that we will have those hearings. But I've mentioned some of the problems. But let me be clear. Plague, war, political nonsense, we could still have those hearings. If we really wanted to get serious about this, we just have the damn hearings. The witnesses are there to testify. The members of Congress are doing hearings right now. And so I understand why they keep coming up with excuses. These are better than some. But we could just blow right through all of that and say, look, we're going to have these hearings. We don't care about these other issues. This issue is actually more important than the outcome of that war in Europe. It's more important than the outcome of this pandemic. It is way more important to who wins the next election at the end of this year. It is transcendent, and we have kept it in a box for 75 years. And that will be viewed by history as a really bad mistake.
Do you think, really quick, we've only got a couple minutes left, so do you think that if we get disclosure, full disclosure, the way Stephen Bassett imagines it, does that help us as a global society? Does that supersede concerns like wars, like in Ukraine and Russia? Meaning, will it put a stop eventually to all of these issues?
I wouldn't phrase it that tough. I'd put it this way. Given the challenges that we face, the problems we've developed, the things we haven't dealt with, the risk we're facing right now, I don't believe we can get through it. I don't think we can avoid nuclear war based upon the current status quo. And this is just the latest situation. There'll be others. I think the only thing that can allow us to get to the other side of this transition we're on with a global society intact is disclosure. It is a force majeure of extraordinary power. It's a game changer, a paradigm shift. And that is got the power to shift the thinking of enough people that we can decide, do we want to live the next 100 years like we have lived the last 10,000 years? All right. And without disclosure, we're screwed. It's that simple.
I'm going to get this question in before we go because I promised Greg. Thank you for your question, Greg. Stephen, can it be repulsion instead of propulsion, referring to the craft that we see, the UAPs? you take the science seriously. What's your best guess?
That's an interesting question. I think that in terms of the antigravitics that we're seeing in our atmosphere, that's kind of it may be a combination of both repulsion and propulsion. I think the interstellar ability they have, because they can fly between star systems, involves something more than repulsion. I'm not sure what it involves. It's the $64,000 equation that we're looking for, but they can do it. And if we can get disclosure, I think we can get to a point one day when we can do it a lot sooner than without disclosure. So again, but by the way, I assure you, the U.S. government knows a great deal about antigravitics. And so you should probably ask the Department of Defense about that. I'm sure they'd be happy to give you an answer.
Any number of acronyms. All right, Steve, thank you so much for joining tonight. I really do appreciate it. If you want to find out more about Stephen's research and work, paradigmresearchgroup.com.
.org.
Thank you, Steve. Oh, you know what, Stephen? There was a, before we go, there was an attempt to get 5,000 signatures for disclosure. Did you see this?
I've seen a number of these. There have been a number of petitions coming and
why,
going.
Why
and
can't we get those bigger numbers? Because you and I both know there are tons of people out there.
Petitions have lost a lot of their power. They're just too easy to put together online and so forth, right? There was a time when you had to go out and gather them, and you had to go out and get sheets of paper. And so if you got 100,000, it was a big deal. Now it's not a big deal. Somebody starts a TikTok account, has 1 million followers in 6 months, but it's still worth doing. And I'm glad that people do it. Create your petitions, put it out there. Every one of these is just another message to the government. We're done with the embargo, guys. We want disclosure. We want to find out all about this. We have a right to know and need to know, and we can handle the truth. So give it up. So I'm cool with that.
Let's leave it at that. Thank you, Steve. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, and we'll be right back on the other side of this quick break with Chrissy Newton. She is the host of Alt Pop Repeat. What a great title. I've always loved that. It's so catchy. And she is a fantastic talent. We will be right back. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on Paranormal Pop YouTube channel, rebroadcast on the UNX Network, 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will see you on the flip side. This coffee is delicious. Is that a UFO? I'm actually seeing a UFO. This coffee is awesome. That's why they call it alien coffee bean. Is this even made on Earth? Hey y'all, Paranormal Now will be syndicated on the UNX Network, the new mainstream, where you can find your favorite hosts and shows on the cutting edge of ufological and paranormal news and topics. Listen for Paranormal Now rebroadcast on the X at 2 a.m. EST Fridays, 11 p.m. PST Thursdays at unxnetwork.com. Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith. Thank you for hanging with us tonight. That was a fantastic first hour with Stephen Bassett. He never lets down. And coming up in a moment, we have Chrissy Newton. And I just want to remind you that if you like the bumper music, please check out Septembrio's website. go and check out their iTunes or wherever you download your music, because they are really good people. Michael A, he's a really fantastic talent, and I very, very much appreciate his contributing his music to this show. So that's at Septembrio, spelled with a Y, septembrio.com. All right. So Chrissy Newton has her eye on the cosmos and the world beyond, which has always been a fascination for her. From UFOs, astronomy to ancient civilizations, her curiosity is as limitless as the universe. By day, she's an owner of Vocab Communications and an award-winning PR professional with a knack for getting people talking. And by night, she co-hosts a podcast called Alt Pop Repeat, where she syncs counterculture and subculture with pop culture trends and movements. The show can be found on all major streaming platforms or on Dash Radio's Dash Talk X in Los Angeles. When she's not co-hosting her own podcast, you can find Christy creating and co-hosting tech, science, defense, and UFO-themed show called Rebelliously Curious with Chrissy Newton on the Debrief YouTube channel and website, along with being a partner and director of media and PR for the Debrief. With a love for traveling, science, cultures, fashion, astronomy, counterculture, sci-fi, and surrealistic art. That's awesome. Chrissy wanted to create a podcast that captures both pop and counterculture worlds and convey how closely they're synced. And that's so true. And it's a little bit of what Stephen and I were talking about tonight as well. With an end goal to show listeners that everyone is connected in some shape or form, and differences are merely only perceived by the lexicons and boundaries we create for ourselves. By night, Chrissy's an investigative conversationalist, challenging her audience to consider an alternative way of thinking. Chrissy Newton, welcome to Paranormal Now. I think you have to unmute yourself, Chrissy.
I didn't even
okay,
know.
There we go.
I was laughing. I'm like, I need to shorten that bio a lot.
But I wanted to get, oftentimes, obviously, when we do these, we abbreviate bios, but usually if it's someone's first time, I like to give the full bio if possible, because it really gives people a more in-depth appreciation of what you do. So it was nice to meet you. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to ask you, how did you initially get interested in the paranormal? You have to mute your microphone again. Unmute it.
I don't know why it keeps muting itself. That's weird.
Interesting. Okay.
I know it's like doesn't want me to talk today. Weird. It started really for me, like UFOs was my way in on the paranormal side. It's not that I don't believe in any other paranormal. I just was drawn to UFOs when I was a kid, and my father, and I've talked about this story many times with people too, and I talked about it in different podcasts. My father was really one of those people that brought me into it. He had a UFO sighting when he was around almost 20 years old, or sorry, in his 20s, I would say. And then he was with a group of people when he saw it. So that kind of changed his life. And he took a photo of the UFO. And when I was really young, he showed me a picture of it. And I always say this, like it lit up everything inside of me. And that's where it started. So his passion for UFOs and trying to figure out what happened to him and what was going on kind of became my passion as well. And it just intrigued me so much. And it's something that we still do together and we still talk about. So it's just funny now because I'm educating him a little bit more. The roles have reversed over the years.
Do you still have that UFO picture, or does he?
Yeah, my dad does. Yeah, my dad still has. Yeah. One day everyone's like, we need to see it, and he has it. And I said to him, it's still in like one of those little. It's like a slide. And so now he has it in a slide. He also has it in a photo. And I know that at one point I said to him, I'm like, I actually want to blow it up and like put it as artwork on the wall.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, is it in your office or your studio somewhere?
No, I have a Billy Meyer photo from the UFO Congress. I have one of them in my place. Yeah, and I have it. I just redid it, so it came down, but I'm putting it back up. I'm going to put it in my hallway. It used to be in my kitchen of all the places. So, but yeah.
Since you brought up Billy Meyer, that reminded me of the X-Files. And did you hear Gillian Anderson's quote recently?
Oh no, I didn't.
Continuing on? I'll have to paraphrase, but she had mentioned that she, obviously in the past, she's like, I'm done with this character. I don't like what she did to, Scully as a female, as a woman.
Yeah.
She was upset about that. But she did say that, you know what, maybe if they do something fresh, get new writers and quote unquote new direction, which seemed to me like a little bit of a jab at Chris Carter. I hope not, but I'm not sure what she meant by that. But what do you think? Should we continue the X-Files or just let it go?
I think we should. I think there should be some new blood in it. I think some science blood would be
Mm-hmm.
really nice too. And talking about current, even just taking stuff like from Project Blue Book when the show came out and taking real cases and and putting them in the X-Files. The one thing that happened with me in the X-Files when I used to watch it, I had to stop at one point because I was getting so upset because of the cliffhangers. Like I couldn't handle it. It was like every season and I was like, just gotta answer the question. And it was gonna drive me crazy. And so at a point I just kind of like dropped off on the X-Files, but for sure, like it was a love, like most people that that's, if anything, I think people watched X-Files and got into UFOs and other paranormal because of that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh man, that's how we feel about any TV now. We become so, I say, my wife and I, we like binge watching. We like to choose when we can finish and start something. So a cliffhanger could even just be like a weekly series. Yeah. And I get so frustrated for the next episode. I'm like, just give me like a few to watch in a row,
I'm a binger in that context. But when I was younger, X-Files, I just couldn't handle it. It was always every season. And I was like, we need to have a conclusion. It was too much, so I'm excited they're coming out with something different and we'll see. I'm excited to see what they do.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's probably a pipe dream, but I'd love to see some kind of way to bring back the lone gunman.
Okay. Yeah.
What about you? Are you okay with how things ended with Jump the Shark, that episode?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm okay with how things ended. I'm like, and some things I don't even remember though too. I'd have to go back and watch some of the X-Files again and like remember certain episodes because it's been so long since I've seen them as well. But I was fine. I'm just at one point too, I dropped off and then jumped back on the bandwagon. But at some point, at least they had some kind of wrap up because that's what we need.
Yeah. That's funny that you say that too, because I think a lot of us went through that same process because it was on for 9 years. And for me, that was a very very fast moving time of my life in the later half of the series. A lot of transitions, a lot of bumps in the roads. So I kind of, I stopped watching it for a little while, but then went back and finished up those last seasons. And, I wonder with ufology, are we going through just another phase of excitement? Or is this something sustainable, what we're hoping for out of a UAP disclosure?
Yeah, I asked this actually to Leslie Keane as well about what she thought if we were going to go through a UFO bubble bust. My first show I launched with Rebelliously Curious was with her. And I asked her that question. Do you think we're going to go through a UFO bubble bust? And I actually think UFOs will always be consistent. Like it's been 70 years of conversations to an extent of history, stories, and then now mainstream media. So I think that it will still be relevant, but we're going to go through lulls. It's going to go through ebbs and flows and we'll see. I'm hoping that it stays consistent with all of us, talking more and trying to have more conversations and pushing things to the forefront, but we're going to see them, for example, like right after the report came out, on June 25th, we went through a little bit of a lull and everyone was like, what's going on? Is this kind of it? And then, we'll spike back up. So we'll see it. But I think it's going to stay a mainstream conversation for a very long time, except if we get extremist groups or other things to that extent that come on. Like I think you had this, I kind of jumped in a little bit before and you were talking about QAnon and with Stephen Bassett. And, that is a fear of mine. And that is that we get extremist groups that will come and attach themselves to, ufology, and people like that word, they don't, but to the UFO topic. And then, really, really, I don't want to word taint it, but not make it credible enough then anymore for mainstream media to follow it. And it just becomes entertainment again. It becomes, more paranormal than, science fact or hard science going to look at it and answering some questions? I have a real concern with that. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the amazing thing, and what is his most important value, Stephen, is that he's persistent and persistently optimistic.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. We need that desperately, even though if I disagree with him, you need a force like out there constantly pushing forward.
Sorry, my dog just decided to have a day. I think there's a raccoon outside.
That's how these pets work. I know.
It's like, yeah, he's came
like,
from upstairs running like a madman. Yeah. Relax, Steve.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, go on.
No, it's all right. So I guessed, I hadn't put much thought into it as of recently until asked, and I guessed maybe 10 years. But for me, that's optimistic, because we've been down this road so many times, and I do fear that the UAP subject will be appropriated, and that if it becomes tainted in some other way, then are we going to reboot the movie and do it all over again?
Yeah, I don't know if maybe rebooting the movie in that, because maybe if we're champion is considered rebooting again, but yeah, I am concerned that there's something that's going to happen, and I know it is a bipartisan conversation right now, and I'm really happy for that. I'm also scared that politics will decide to take sides. I don't know how that will happen. I don't know what that looks like, but that's also a fear of mine as well, is that politics will come in and do what it does and start to polarize. So I think we just have to be mindful. And the one thing that I look at when I look at the UFO community, it makes me, I have a little bit of I'm optimistic, because I'm not going to use the word governing, because that's not what, UFO Twitter and everyone's for, but it's a collective of people that might not have the same ideals of exactly what's going on, but we care to know the truth. And I think that's the most important part, is that everybody wants the truth at some degree, or figure out what this truth is. Do we all agree on what truth is? Probably not, but we're still looking for it, and we're asking for answers. So I don't think that's ever going to go away. If anything, that's just going to get bigger and bigger. But we'll see what happens in the next 5 to 10 years, or where this topic's going to go. It's just unbelievable. It's in the mainstream now anyway.
Yeah, I think a dream for many people is we have a million person march on Washington. And the thing is, I really do feel like there's a whole ton of people out there that would be willing to be activists in some way to get the truth out there. I guess it's, how do you congregate all those people together? How do you take all these voices that we see out on Twitter, on social media, on YouTube, on independent podcasts, on radio? There's so many people.
And how do you amplify
we don't have this focused push that other movements have. And I know Stephen is really trying, but do you see a future where maybe on social media somehow it comes together?
I hope so. This counterculture that we're all living in is becoming mainstream now. So I think that as more people in the mainstream start to listen and understand and educate themselves, maybe not in 70 years of history, but maybe even just the past 5 to 10 of what's been going on, and get interested in it and want to learn a little bit more, then I think we're going to have a larger echo chamber at some point. This is a different movement as a counterculture outside of something like the LGBT community rights or civil rights. It's very different. We're an area of study. So we need a whole bunch of people to look at this together as one. Yes. So very different, but we still live in this in this counterculture world together as a group. So I think as more people start to become more interested, more educated, and aware of what's going on, then they'll start asking more questions, and then we'll have more of the masses coming forward and asking for questions, and wanting answers too, and asking more questions. I think that's probably where we're going to lead. I hope we do, I should say.
I hope so too. Do you think that independent groups or non-governmental groups like the Galileo Project, now that is backed by university as well.
It is, yeah.
But you have Skyfort with Sean Cahill, and I forget the other one. It's X something. I don't know if you can recall, but there are these new nonprofits popping up to do
UAPs. Yeah.
UAPs. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Doing the hard work.
Yeah.
To me, that's the most exciting thing about all this. That's where I think the forces. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. The Galileo project I love. I
Hmm.
think Avilov's fantastic in what he's doing. I know not everybody agrees with him on what's
Hmm.
happening, but I recently just watched Avilov's YIP lecture I think it was last Thursday.
Interesting.
And he did some updates on the Galileo project, and he talked about, using the James Webb Telescope as a
Hmm.
possibility as well in finding more Oumuamua objects. They talked
Hmm.
about they're building a telescope on top of Harvard, and they're
Yeah.
going to be looking as well. So there's all these developments that are going on, and that one is really exciting for me because I
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
that there are a little bit of researchers that might be on the fringe side that Abby's kind of still looking at and listening to and helping to gather data.
Hmm.
But there is this combination of academics and then a little bit of fringe that's coming together. I'm going to say way more academic, obviously, but I like that. It doesn't mean that I don't respect the fringe science, because I do, because we need to start somewhere and need to be doing it. But I'm
Hmm.
happy that Harvard and other academics and scientists are looking at this, that will even listen or have a conversation with the fringe community and
Hmm.
start then diving a little bit deeper. So we'll see. The nice thing with Harvard and academic schools like that is you get the funding is so much larger, which is really, really great. And you're going to be able to get tons more data. It doesn't mean that UAPX won't be able to do it, but it's really, really hard with a developing organization to grow fast. Harvard will grow fast because you have the science community, part of people in the science community backing it and funding it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, and then I guess you, by osmosis, start trickling these conversations out through the scientific community,
Yeah.
because you have these people working on a project together,
Yeah.
and you have to wonder about younger scientists up and coming that admire the likes of Avi Loeb, and they're
Yeah.
going, "Oh, can I get involved on that thing? Maybe I'm a little curious if this guy's doing it. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it won't hurt my career to do so." So you're
Yeah.
right that it is very impactful. I hope in the long run.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
that's part of Avi's goal too. I don't know if that's part of his life mission, but I know that he speaks highly about, wanting to educate younger people that are looking to get into science and make it exciting for them and be able
mhm.
to keep their minds open to asking questions and not have the science community close it off because they're saying, "Oh, that's paranormal, that's fringe." It's like, no,
Yeah.
science is supposed to have an open mentality about topics like this. So, I've heard him say that many times, and I respect that a lot because it's nice to have somebody that is pushing to bring new ideas and rather than just always sitting with the old. Yeah.
Yeah. In your mind, is there something that you've imagined that no one's doing that you kind of think, I wish they were doing this right now?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. I don't know. I wish they were doing, gosh, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
yeah, what I should ask you. It's like, what do you
What?
think? What would you like
Okay.
them to be
If I
doing?
had
Yeah.
okay, so if I had to answer that, and I'll answer it with this because I
Yeah.
was thinking to ask you or draw this other parallel.
Yeah.
So in archaeology, let's say, right? I've been using this example a lot lately. Edith Pretty,
Yeah.
who had discovered Sutton Hoo, Anglo-Saxon burial site. She was very amateur archaeologist. She was more educated. She traveled the world. She learned about archaeology, but she was not. She wasn't a digger. She tried to get mainstream academia, British Museum, whoever, to listen to her. Like, I have these mounds on my property. There's something here. We need to look at this. And she was ignored. So she had to get an amateur, quote unquote, amateur archaeologist, Basil. I forget his last name, Basil Brown, I think it was. Anyway, he helped her dig, and he wasn't part of academia, but he had experience digging. And so the two amateurs had to get together, do the work to uncover evidence, and finally academia said, "Oh, okay, can we? We're gonna have to step in here and take a look at this now." And I kind of feel like, because you were saying fringe, and I wonder what you meant by that. Does fringe mean the same thing as an amateur scientist or researcher?
Yeah, yeah, I would say in my vocabulary for sure. It's just
Okay.
not, it's not, it doesn't mean that fringe science is not, it can't be academic. It's
Hmm.
just not looked at in academia, right? We don't have a school or anybody else or an institute that's looking at it. It also has to be fact checked too, right? And it has to be peer reviewed and whole bunch of other things. Sometimes when you're doing areas of study and stuff that's not peer reviewed, it, you know, and to be honest, the science community comes out with tons of stuff. But when they talked about the tardigrades being quantum entangled, they weren't quantum entangled. And there's like a whole article, and they released a press release around it. I did an episode on tardigrades because I love them, and so I talked to Mike Shaw, who's a tardigrade expert, and we talked about that. We talked about them being quantum entangled, but they weren't. It was just a really spicy headline, so everyone in the mainstream picked it up. But it hasn't been peer reviewed yet. So those are things that, maybe, I would like more things that are studied. That's some other stuff is peer reviewed, along with UFOs or any other. If we're looking at, oh my gosh, I just forgot his name too. Talking about he's from Stanford. Oh my gosh, Nolan. What is his name now? He's actually looking at what they say alleged crash UFO materials. And so he's from Stanford. He's very well respected. And so I think that there are people that are coming forward and looking at this in academic lights, and I think more will come. The one thing that actually I think I would like them to do more, and I just thought of this now, and I've said this before, I want journalists to have a better understanding and a crash course of the UFO story and what's happened and history around UFOs. It would be nice for that to happen, because a lot of mainstream journalists right now that are covering it are really looking at even us, even I'll call us even on the fringe side of it, looking at people in the YouTube space, looking at independent journalism, freelance journalists, and saying, hey, way more than I do, and taking ideas from them, or, asking them and learning from them. And those people aren't really always getting the credit. It's the mainstream journalist is. So I would like that mainstream journalists would start reading a little bit more, or companies like networks start looking at people within the community and realizing that there is a lot to offer, and they're doing better journalism. And a lot of people are doing way better journalism on this topic than the mainstream media is. So that's it. I wish they would ask harder questions and better questions. So Razor I think, and that might come. Yeah.
Sure. Razor says Gary Nolan.
Thank you, Gary Nolan. That's it. I forgot Gary's first name. Thank you. Yeah. Gary Nolan, amazing in what he's doing. I just watched a Lex Friedman interview with him too, and I'm, he's been taking a lot of flack for that too, for talking about crash materials that he allegedly has, and is looking into them and analyzing them. It's unbelievable.
Where is the material allegedly from that Gary Nolan is studying?
I forget. I think it was given to him, and I think he has a couple pieces too. It's not just one. I think he has multiple pieces. But again, don't quote me on that. If anyone's listening and knows for sure, please let us know. But I believe it was given to him from groups of people, or at least one person that had the material. So I don't know the actual location from it. Yeah.
It's
I don't think he actually says that too. And Lex Friedman, I would have to read some of his other interviews, but I don't know if he's mentioned locations. Yeah.
And probably maybe it's best that he doesn't for the time being. I know it can be fascinating and frustrating. You have Jacques Vallée over the years. I know that people had given him materials, and at some point some things were tested, but nothing conclusive, obviously, of extraterrestrial origin. But who knows what else he has yet to be tested. We had that piece of metal that Linda Moulton Howe had that was given to her by Art Bell that I think went to Bill Bigelow. So it's like all these pieces are getting passed around. Imagine if you're from the outside looking in, watching these stories, you might be thinking, I don't know about all this.
Yeah, that's true. And right now, that's the only way I think we can do it, until there is a place that academia or anywhere else is going to analyze it, and there's proper labs that are going to analyze it consistently for us. And, you're able to take your material there. That's the only way that would ever happen. But right now, I think that's the only thing that we have as options, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I'd rather get amazing testing done and then just eliminate if it's a false positive, if it's not really what people claim it was that they had discovered, or it was given to them by someone from inside the military, whatever it is. Let's eliminate the ones that aren't real, and let's get down to the to the truth. Do you think, Chrissy Newton, that we indeed had a crashed UFO in Roswell?
Her belief is one of those things. Yeah, like there's so many conversations around Roswell, if it, what was happening was true, it's not,
Yeah.
it was staged. I'm gonna say I don't know anymore. I don't know. I think years ago I really believed it too. And I've
Hmm.
recently I've a lot of my belief or what I know about UFOs, and again, belief structure, it's not in my concept and what I believe that UFOs is not a belief system.
Hmm.
I know that UFOs are real and the government is talking about that. So now the question is, what are they instead of do I
Sure.
believe? But
Yeah.
do I think that it happened? I don't know anymore. I
Hmm.
think my mind is always switching back and forth. So when people ask me about stuff like that, I'm not trying to be like, political on it. I just
Sure.
don't
Yeah.
know. And I'm okay saying that now, because before I would say, oh, definitely for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But as I learn more, everything changes. Like even what I think is going on is
Mm-hmm.
very different than what I thought about 5 years ago what was happening. So my opinions and what I know is always
Mm-hmm.
evolving, and I'm gonna keep doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's how it should be. Totally.
I think
You
so
know,
too. Yeah,
obviously, discussing the paranormal, you have to keep an open mind. But an open mind
yeah,
means you don't just subscribe to a new belief system and then
yeah,
stick to that, just because it was counterculture to whatever else you were believing.
yeah.
We have to
And
keep.
I'm
We have to
okay
move.
people telling. Yeah, I'm okay people
Yeah.
telling me new information and changing my opinions and what I
Right.
what I know and understand. I think we
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
do that. We have to grow, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of people have a hard time doing that. I think that's
Yeah.
we see a lot of that in the paranormal community in particular. Um, okay, so let's go out there a little bit then. Uh, some of the behavior of the UAPs and some of the pilots' testimonies speak to something very bizarre in how they behave. In some cases, I think I can't remember now, but the UAP kind of came in and out of existence, like it kind of disappeared and appeared again,
Yeah.
out of in and out of we don't even know what. So was it a shield? Was it something went wrong with the sensor? But then if you're witnessing with your eyes, and this UAP disappears, what does that mean? Do you think that we're dealing with just extraterrestrials from another dimension or another planet?
I stick more to the interdimensional theory right
Really?
now.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it doesn't mean that I don't believe in extraterrestrials, but extraterrestrials could be interdimensional. Like
Mm-hmm.
we don't know. No, nobody knows. And I always say that anybody who says they know, I run away from them as fast as possible because they scare me. We don't know. No, I don't think anyone really knows, and I don't know if we have the ability to understand what's going on right now too. I think we're getting close to that. So I subscribe to the interdimensional because I think we're getting to a place where science is not quickly, but starting to come close to looking at this and then understanding and analyzing and having better analyzing tools to
Mm-hmm.
make better scientific,
Yeah.
yeah, um, statements. And then we can go, okay. And we're going to learn
Mm-hmm.
other things too through this, probably through researching UFOs. We're going to learn tons about different science and everything else that's going on around us. So I'm prepared for that, and I'm waiting for that too. And I've been watching. It's not so much that I don't listen to the paranormal side anymore, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
very tuned into the science side now. And I am, because I'm very curious to see what they're going to do, and I'm curious to see what scientists want to do in the next 5 to 10 years, and how they're going to bring this to the forefront more,
Mm-hmm.
or discoveries that they're going to find. So we'll see.
We have a really great question from Android Purity. What
Okay.
things give her doubts about Roswell?
Oh gosh, I think there's so much conversation. I've watched so many other documentaries that have
Mm-hmm.
said that it's not. I think we look at people coming forward and saying that it's not real. My dad is just like, it happened, and we've had this conversation too. And again, it doesn't mean that I don't think that it's happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just so much back and forth that's come forward where
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
saying that, it was misinformation and it was created. And I just, I, it's so, it's so long ago. And that, well, people do, obviously there is some form of truth around it. And I would like that one day to be, for us to find out what it is, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to focus on the past. I'm going to focus on the future. because I think we have to at this point, you know, and I think looking at those stories, we're never going to leave them and give them up. I think we can always go back to them. But I think wondering if it's true or not right now, there's more stuff that I think we need to worry about in the UFO community, also in the world as well. But in the UFO community, I think we have to know of all these things that are coming forward from FOIA requests and the CIA putting out documents. We have a lot of information now that's in front of us. I think we should be looking at that, and then we can start, you know, when we get a better handle on that, then we start looking maybe back at Roswell again. But there's a lot of information coming out in the UFO community, more than I've ever seen in years. And I would imagine Stephen Bassett and everybody else would agree with that.
Yeah. And I think the mostly multifaceted approach is extremely important. Case in point, you were mentioning new technology, you know, sensor systems or whatever. That's exactly what we need. And the UAPT, the UAPT task force, in the assessment said that exact thing, that we need to develop new technologies to measure these things and study them. And so you have the government recognizing that. Then you have Galileo Project and other people that are, you know, fringe or, you know, amateur researchers and scientists trying to do the same thing. So maybe that's the tipping point. Maybe we just haven't had the right way to, you know, sense these things, measure them, capture them.
Yeah, I think that's where, and also in the reports that they were going to use AI. You know, AI was something that they were going to lean on, and I'm excited. I want to know more about that. It's like, what AI technology do you guys have? So I think we will start seeing more tech and more science and everything else going towards research. And that, to me, that's really exciting. That's more exciting than watching a sci-fi show. To me, trust me, I love sci-fi, but more than watching a paranormal show or a sci-fi show. One of my, goals and what I would love to actually finally happen too is we look at entertainment, and entertainment will start then giving credit to science and start talking less paranormal and going more hard science and more hard facts. It'd be really nice to see that, because I think the challenge with entertainment is that it can fluff it up so much, and it doesn't always give credit, and it's not hard science that's in it, so you can't really fact check things, and so that's hard. And then it stays in paranormal. So I would like, and I'm and what I think is going to happen, and I hope this happens, is that we look at A&E and we look at Discovery and we look at all those other networks, and they start then going that way as well and talking about current news. Stop doing Roswell documentaries. We have enough of them. We have so much political news that we can talk about. We have so many things that we can chat about now. And that's where I would like that to go. I'd like entertainment and science and news and all of it to start going that way. There's current UFO stuff going on. We're the ones doing the news networks right now. The independent people that are doing it. I think that entertainment and news will have to start going down that way. And I think from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, I think it's going to start to evolve into that. I hope.
Is Canada in tandem with the United States in regard to this subject, or does it have a independent intent?
Great question. So Canadians in the UFO topic, Canadian media, I'm going to say the average Canadian person for sure, I know, is interested in UFOs. I don't know if it's on their mind every day, but it still interests people. I have tons of people that message me that are Canadians that want to talk about UFOs. I have friends for sure that want to chat about it. When it comes to mainstream media, because we can, put them into sections, mainstream media, not so much. It only follows, for example, a UFO story will break, and then maybe 2 weeks later, a Canadian story will come out. That happens with, it's crazy. It's happened with tons of breaking stories. Yeah. Or they're just so late to the ball game, and it happens all the time. And as a Canadian, it's really unfortunate, and it's upsetting too, because part of my job is working with mainstream media to talk about UFO stories with them. It's what I do with the debrief. I do PR for the news outlet, but taking our stories that we're breaking and introducing them to mainstream media where they're like, oh my gosh, like this is going on. And you're like, yeah, and here's all the facts. You might have just missed it. And so that's part of that goal. And Canadians are really, really late to it. Americans are way better. American media is just way better at reporting on it. Politically, we are moving into maybe in a place. We had Larry McGuire, who is our another person. I believe he is a liberal. If I'm not, I believe he's not a conservative. He's a liberal that has been looking to bring up the conversations about UFOs and what's happening in military bases and bring them forward to the States and have larger conversations about them. So he's doing stuff now as a representative. And then we have like Chris Rakowski, who at one point was given mostly not all the pilot ones, but he was given a lot of Transportation Canada documents that were given to him about UFOs. Okay. So what he would do was he just kind of, he kept them from over the years. And then he would later on release information as it would go forward. But the Canadian government was giving it to him. Transportation Canada was. That stopped now. So he's not doing that anymore. And then now what they're happening is that I believe that the American government, or sorry, the Canadian government at some point will probably, I would think, might do some form of a UFO office. And that might happen. And that might not be a positive thing because it's easier to get information right now. Daniel Otis, if anyone knows, just released, he sent in a FOIA request to the Canadian government and Transportation Canada. And I believe that there was over 300 or maybe it was 500, if you quote me wrong, UFO stories that they released to him. Yeah. Wow. And sending, so Daniel Otis did a Vice News piece on that. And I did an interview with him. I co-host Summer in the Skies with Ryan Sprague. And we ended up doing a piece on that as well. So there's stuff happening, but it's just trickling in the Canadian space right now. But I think we'll see more action in the next couple of years, I hope.
Yeah. And I mean, and like you said, here, there's always action. I mean, even John Greenwald Jr. had released a FOIA that took him a few years to get regarding an inquiry into one of the pilots. I forget. I don't know if it was the Nimitz that he witnessed. I can't remember. Oh no, it was a gimbal, and asking him like, "What did you see?" So, and this was in 2019. The U.S. government was interviewing a pilot, saying, "Hey, what's going on? What did you see? We need to learn something here, right?" And that's interesting. That was not part of the conversation up until yesterday. So, I am optimistic as to future releases. Do you think that the task force is going to do anything more significant than it already has? Are we going to have another report at some point in the next couple of years, maybe?
Well, I think that they have to have reports now. I believe that, isn't it? It's not quarterly, but for sure it's annually that they're reporting. The other conversation too is we look at the Air Force. It's gone AWOL on this. Christopher Mellon did a piece with us on the debrief about how they went AWOL. And that brought up we did a piece attached to The Hill that we ended up releasing that. We released his article, and The Hill did a backup story with us. And that caused a little bit of stir on The Hill. And, we're happy about that. It's that's asking questions about why aren't certain areas within government reporting properly? Why are they absent from this, especially the Air Force? You would think that they've seen so much and all of the capabilities. So Christopher Mellon lists all the different types of surveillance capabilities in that article. And there's so many of them. So the question is, well, first of all, it's scary because if they're not tracking what we would think might be a UAP, are the systems working and can they track foreign adversaries? Major question for us, especially now since what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, and then along with China and everything else. And then also where's the taxpayers' money going towards, right? If these systems aren't working the way they should be, then maybe we need to look at the systems. And that's probably not the case. The case is that they're just not reporting it, and we don't know why. And so we'll see now in the next report, I hope. Yeah.
And anyone who's curious, I put Chrissy's link in the chats on Facebook and YouTube. So Thanks. Go to vocabcommunications.com. So what we have to talk about this documentary, A Tear in the Sky, that you were featured in, right?
I'm only in a little section of it, and I can't talk a little bit about it because I can't talk too much about it. But I'm in a little tiny section in the documentary.
Well, I mean,
it's kind of doing a cameo. I think I'm like cameo in and out. But I want to leave Carolyn Corey to speak to all of that and the UAPX guys, and it's their movie. It's their time. I was just happy to be in the right place at the right time when all of that was going down. So
okay, yeah, very cool. Can you give us a tease? of what it's about.
Alan, you're killing me. Uh,
Well, the trailer dropped, right? So at least we have some
right.
sense.
Watch
Yeah,
the
yeah.
trailer. Everybody watch
I
the
see.
trailer.
Okay.
Please do. You can go to Carolyn Curry's YouTube page to watch it.
This is what happens when you ask a communications expert.
Exactly. Plug it in. I will say there's some wonderful cameos with William Shatner in it that you guys saw there too, and it is taking science and taking real equipment and scientific equipment and looking and observing the phenomenon in real time. So it's exciting. It's exciting, and if that's where we're going with documentaries, where we're looking at again science and real equipment. And state-of-the-art equipment, looking at and analyzing this, and then later on, hopefully having it peer reviewed, then we're going in a good place. So
I think so too. And she really set a good tone with Superhuman, which I really liked because it was about, hey, let's just put a few experiments in here and see what we can get. And it was interesting. It got your attention. So if they take that idea and build on it towards, real science with UAP, I think you're absolutely right. We've been for decades and decades, documentaries, many of which are really good, looking at UFO cases, looking at alien abduction cases. Most of the evidence that's presented is eyewitness testimony or, paper trails, FOIA documents, like Roswell, for instance, right? When we have a ton of witnesses interviewed by, Donald Schmidt, Kevin D. Randall, Stanton Friedman, and that makes it a compelling case, but it's hard to say for an absolute fact that is a real crashed UFO incident. So with these new approaches, maybe we'll actually get some, indisputable data and evidence. I've always been a defender of shows like Ancient Aliens or Skinwalker Ranch, because even though there is the entertainment value and a side of it, which is most of it, there's a legitimate, sincere interest by most of the people that work on those programs. And like Skinwalker Ranch, they are doing some real science. I mean, they're using real equipment. I mean, how much is dramatized? I don't know. But at least the entertainment factor brings some funding into the study of these topics.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to crucify entertainment for, not doing the UFO topic maybe justice all the time, but it does bring awareness, and it started with entertainment bringing awareness. And I think that's really important too. I'm just hoping that it evolves more than just paranormal. I want it to be more current. I want it to be more science. I want it to be as much fact as we can possibly get into it. And I think it will go that way. But yeah, I do. Like I'm happy that people are actually like Ancient Aliens, as much as I not always, I've loved them before, but I don't agree with everything that, that the show has. But it did something that it brought the conversation to the forefront. And that's really important. It's just harder now because Ancient Aliens has been on for so long, and it's done its job. Now I think we're evolving to the next type of show, which I don't know what it will be, but we'll find out at some point, I think. Yeah. It's been like at least 13 years, isn't it? I think for Ancient Aliens. It's been a long time. Yeah,
it was 2000. I think it's
done its job.
Yeah, I think it was 2009 when it started. Yeah. Do you see the two opposing factions behind the scenes that are, opposing each other? One says, "Hey, release this information," and the other side says, "No, we can't do that because XYZ." Or do you think there's just a few people in the higher ups? How do you see that dynamic? Because obviously, I mean, you have people that were literally denying Lou Elizondo's position, which was an outright lie. And are they just, following the commands of a higher up or someone else? Or, there are other people in this field that say, there's really a cabal behind all this that's trying to keep it under closed doors. What's your take? What's your read on all that?
Yeah. Don't mind me. I just realized that my one camera, so I can look at you this way, decided to wonderfully die. So I have to look this way. Don't mind. Yeah. So do I think that somebody's, like Paul Hellard was very much about the cabal and spoke a lot that and wrote about it. Outside of UFOs, Money Mafia is one of his books that he would talk about, is about his worries about money and what was going to happen within our own economies and what that's going to do to us in the cabal. So there is that, and then there is, is Lou Elizondo a disinformation agent? I don't know. From me knowing Lou, and I've talked to Christopher Mellon, I've done some PR on that side with him, especially through the debrief. I am not either of their publicists, so I don't know anything in that, just to make sure people know that. But I do speak with them, and I don't think that, from what I see right now, I don't see disinformation, but it doesn't mean that that's not true. I don't want to wake up one day and be like, oh my gosh, I was part of a whole greater scam to push disinformation. It would be a horrible, horrible thing to know later on in life about that. So I'm mindful. I still talk to them, and and I give them credit right now of what they're doing. But it doesn't mean that I'm not always analyzing what's happening all the time. I'm always looking to see that if Chris, and let's be honest, they don't need to tell me the truth. I don't know them anything. If anything, I'm a PR person and a podcaster to them, that might have a voice in to some extent, but I am not a massive echo chamber in that place. So they don't really owe me anything. If anything, they're just keeping a relationship, is probably, in a positive one, is what they would want, right? They wouldn't want anything negative for me to say or anybody else in that. So they are taking care of their reputation as much as possible anybody else would do. But as a disinformation agent, I don't know. And I really hope he's not. And I hope they're not, because that would be the worst thing, I think, to happen to the UFO topic. I think that would just discredit the topic quicker than QAnon would, to be honest. Both of them have been massive, spokespeople for this topic. And once something comes forward saying that they're disinformation agent, it would be scary, because mainstream media would maybe stop talking to them, because they are the forefronts right now having this conversation with mainstream media. It's not us, it's them. So them being disinformation agents would never do anything good for us. And that would discredit, the topic very quickly.
We have a comment from Android Purity. A lot of people I have talked to who don't watch news still have no idea the Pentagon issued a report admitting UFOs are real. Do you feel that's true? Do you think there's still a whole ton of people out there that you just can't believe they don't even know about this?
Oh, for sure. There's lots of people that I've said, I've talked to Dave Foley about this in interviews too, and on my show, and he he says too, he's like, even his friends are like, read the New York Times daily. Like when that in 2017, when the article came through with like Leslie and Ralph, they were like, what? That actually happened? And so, and they didn't even know. And he's like, you read the New York Times every day. So there's lots of people that are still like very not sure what's going on. They're looking at other things. They're concerned with other things that are going on. The UFO topic's not a concern to them. The one thing Stephen Bassett said before I jumped on here and I was listening to it about, taking a break right now, maybe because things like what's happening in the Ukraine and war and potential nuclear war is way more of a conversation. And I'd rather more people talking about that than UFOs right now, to be honest.
Of course,
it's a major concern. Yeah. And so, but I do think there's tons of people that still, for example, and I should, maybe another story too, I'm rambling here. When I was in California recently, I was invited to go to dinner with my friends. And so I ended up meeting like a group of his friends, and I was sitting at dinner, and I always laugh because he's like, Chrissy's the alien girl. I'm like, I'm not the alien girl. I'm like, gosh, and these taglines. And so I laughed, and they're like, so tell us something about aliens. And you're like, oh, it's like a comedian, like, tell me a joke. And you're like, okay, I know, it's the worst. And so I'm like, well, I'm like, I'm like, if we're going to talk, I'm like, aliens doesn't mean UFOs. But anyway, I'm like, if we're going to talk about UFOs, I'm like, I've said to them, I'm like, well, you guys, I'm Canadian, but you have an office now in the Department of Defense, and you have a UFO office. And the wife was like, oh my God. And like, I watched her head explode and she's like, what? And both her and her husband are like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh yeah, there was a report from the government that came out on, on June 25th, the preliminary assessment report. And it stated that, there was 144 like UAP activity that they didn't know. And one of them they explained, and I think they called it a balloon, and the other was 143 were unexplained. And for them, like, it was like, I couldn't, like, it's like a whole new world.
Yes,
and they're like, oh my God,
exactly.
I'm going to look into this now. I'm going to look into this. And I'm like, yeah, you can. I'm like, well, it's, if you follow politics and you're always listening to politics, then this might bring you into it. And I said to them, I'm like, go look at Senator, Rubio and look at all these other Podesta. I said, you like politics, trust me, it's UFOs are right beside it right now. So you're getting it. Yeah. Yeah, we're getting it. And these are academics too, in many ways. Yeah.
Can you use it as such, or has it accidentally happened? Alt pop repeat as a like bait and switch. So someone comes to that to listen to some of the other topics, and then you kind of drop some UFO news. And do you think you expose people who may not otherwise be exposed to it?
It's so funny. It's a great question too. But my the podcast that I have, for sure, I talk about. We've had two interviews where we talk about UFOs and how they move from counterculture into mainstream pop culture. Our first episode was about that because I was watching it move, and I was so I love culture, I love counterculture, and I love alternative cultures. But I'm also in a counterculture, right? I love UFOs. So I kind of laughed when I started the podcast because I wasn't really thinking that that's what I was doing. And then later on, I was like, Chrissy, you're just doing a podcast and something that you already live in. But more of the debrief. That's where I talk more about UFOs, science, and tech, and rebelliously curious with Chrissy Newton. That's my place to be able to express that side of me and have fun. So I don't get to always have the conversations. Marie calls me the UFO girl in the podcast and I'll pop repeat, because that's more like mainstream pop culture. We're talking to experts and celebrities, and we're talking to them about their specific counterculture. So it could be cannabis, it could be LGBTQ, it could be drag. There's so many different countercultures, and then also subcultures. We're also doing a whole thing on that as well. So I don't always get to talk about that with them, but I do on Rebelliously Curious because it's connected to the debrief. So occasionally, for example, Chris Hadfield is an astronaut. He was my second interview that I did. And I asked him about UFOs at the end of it. And I could see that he didn't like that question. And we all know Chris Hadfield's recent statements about UFOs. He's like, I've seen a lot of unexplained things.
Unexplained things.
But but he doesn't believe they're aliens and I don't know if he even really believes that they're UFOs per se. But he knows that there is something anomalous happening. But his last my interview with him, he wasn't the biggest fan of that question, and he gets it a lot too, I think. So sometimes I kind of put it in there to see how people react.
And I think that the more people know, the better, right? The numbers eventually, if you have a large enough public, a populace who says we need answers, what's going on, then maybe we can get answers. And Android, you're reading my mind, so I'll ask him this question before we go. If the majority of the public doesn't know about the Pentagon's report, what would it take for most people to take notice? We've been brushing up against that, but what do you think, Chrissy?
To more people to take notice? I just think more people getting involved. Again, maybe even switching, what I keep saying too, is switching the entertainment and changing it, because people that don't, some people, and this is not everybody, just because you don't, I like science and paranormal. You can like them both. Like, it's not like you have to pick one or the other. But I would say that, if entertainment and news start moving that way, you're going to get people that are not very interested in paranormal that are watching these programs and they're seeing more hard science. I think you're going to get more people interested because they're going to go, oh, okay, there's like some fact in this. Like, for them, not saying that what has happened for people is not that it's not true, but they're going to have a little bit more believability when other things that they can like touch or feel and see and be able to experience or learn from. I think that they'll be able to come and want to learn more about UFOs at some point, and just more government statements coming out, more reports, more and more reports.
Have you ever had a really high strangeness encounter?
I have. I have. When I was I was with my ex-boyfriend at his place,
Hmm.
and it was a backyard UFO, or what I call it. And
Really? Wow.
yeah, it was the middle of the day, and I always have to say this because I always tell people, I'm like, if you're having a cocktail, you got to mention it. You can't, And I think we had like I was we were just drinking a Corona, product placement right there. But anyway, and I was having a drink with my at that time boyfriend, and
Hmm.
I looked to my left, and like, what is that? And I just out loud, I'm like, what is that? I'm like, and he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, look. And so it was a little fireball with this like tiny little, like it wasn't a jet stream, that's for sure.
Hmm.
And it was tiny, but it was moving so slowly. And I just kept staring at it. And I'm like, what? And we're both, and I'm like, what is that? And it doesn't mean that it was a UFO. It was just, it wasn't
Hmm.
explained. And so we were staring, but yeah, it was moving. And it was like, yeah, it had no jet stream, you couldn't hear it. But it was like, and it wasn't a plane, that's for sure. Unless the plane was on fire, but then we would have known, but
Hmm.
would have heard it on the news. But yeah, it had a massive like light on the top of it, and then a little tiny like jet stream in the end that almost looked like
Oh.
fire was coming out. Yeah, it was crazy. And
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 then
so
did it
then
just?
what happened is we were talking, and then like a black jet ended up flying over his house. And we're like, they're actually going towards and looking at it.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so they went to some Air Force, and I don't know where this was. It was in Kitchener Waterloo, which is an hour outside of Toronto. It's like where he lived at that time,
Hmm.
and it flew over, and then it flew back. So when we looked, it was gone, and then when we
Okay.
looked back on it, it disappeared, and then the plane flew back over the same course that it flew back in, or flew
Wow.
on towards. It should make sense. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
it was yeah it was, and so we both were like, what was that? And we looked it up, and then we noticed other people from had other sightings that were similar, but that was years ago, not
Hmm.
within our region, but very similar sightings to it. Because I was looking up days after, like I've never seen anything like that, and I've never seen a concept of a UFO like that. And then I believe my ex's brother said the same thing, where he was just like, "Oh, I think somebody in California has seen something similar to this as well." So I've
Yeah.
seen them, but I don't know. It could have been. It doesn't mean it was a UFO. It could have been something else as well. But it was very weird, and it was during the day. So, and a lot of UFOs are. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely some of the best sightings.
yeah,
Yeah, Carl Sagan was known to say, "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence." But
yeah,
I've always felt like sometimes you just need evidence, So
yeah.
like, is there for you a bare minimum of evidence that you would need to see to say to yourself, "I 1000% believe
The
that
bare
the."
minimum.
Yeah, is there like, what is that minimum amount of evidence that would cross that threshold into, "I truly believe, UAPs are, off world or otherwise"?
Yeah, I think sightings. I I believe people. When people say that they've seen something, I believe
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Doesn't mean it's a UFO, or but I believe that yeah, I could look at my father. My
Hmm.
father is somebody, he was with a group of people too when they saw this in the car together. They all got out together. So in that case, then, I know my father would never make up a story like that. He has no need to. If
Yeah.
anything, he doesn't like people wanting to know who he is. If anything, he's happy to talk about it with friends and people that like UFOs, but he doesn't want publicity or anything like that. And he's a very truthful, honest man. So that right there says a lot. And other people I know, it's changed their entire lives. And so if something has changed your life that much and you keep questioning it consistently, then to
Hmm.
me, there's a lot of evidence in that. We look at John Mack. John Mack said, we even brought Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan didn't believe any of the experiencers at all. He called it pay dirt. He thought that people were just trying to make money off it. He has a
Oh.
quote saying that. Yeah.
Hmm.
So Carl Sagan, I don't know what he's quoted about UFOs, but I know with
Yeah.
experiencers, he had no care for it. But John Mack did, and John Mack said, his if and this is experiencers, not so much UFOs, right? They
Hmm.
are they are separate, can be together, but they are, just because you're experiencer, you can see a UFO as well, but there's a connection to them. But John Mack said that for him, evidence is talking to these people. It's
Yeah, yeah.
evaluating them as a psychologist. And so I think that that's really important, and we need to look at that information even more and give people benefit of the doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, and a platform like yours, platform like this, you know,
Yeah.
we speak to experiencers, and you know they're very authentic and sincere often, than more often than not. Chrissy, thank you so much for being
Thank
with me
you,
tonight.
Alan.
Yeah,
Thank
if you
you,
could leave
Alan.
us with one thought before we go, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Anything.
Keep looking up.
Okay.
It was the only thought I had. Like, there are probably many more thoughts after this. I'm gonna send you an email and be like, Alan, I have a better thought.
You can text me, that's fine, but
I will.
we
I
won't.
will have a better
We'll
thought.
put it on
No,
Facebook.
I would just
Yeah,
I keep asking questions. I think people keep
sure.
asking questions, keep always wondering, and keep your curiosity.
Yeah.
You know, it's so important. It's all we have. And if we don't ask questions and try to learn more, you know, we're never going to evolve. So I ask people to do that. Yeah.
All right, go to vocabcommunications.com to find out more about Chrissy. Chrissy, have a good night.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Bye.
All right. And thank you all for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. As always, please like, subscribe, comment down below, share this. Little by little, we are growing this channel. So I appreciate all of your efforts to help support as well, and continue to bring you really great guests. As always, until next time, peace and love, and live in the mystery.